I'm just going to give tonight's Dhamma talk, and tonight's talk is on the Sambodhi Sutta, also known as the Sutta on the Wings to Awakening. And in this sutta, the Buddha teaches a recurring theme throughout his teaching career on the importance of wise associations. And another word for associations would be clinging or attachment. And what the Buddha teaches and what we understand through developing the Eightfold Path is that to a great extent, who and what we associate with will determine our life experience and will determine the view of ourselves. In other words, a mind that's rooted in ignorance will create an identity by its associations, and through what those associations view is. A good example might be the political climate that's so polarized today, but that's just one example. And most importantly, it's who and what we associate our Dhamma practice with that will determine whether we gain the culmination of what the Buddha taught as his Dhamma practice, which is a mind resting in equanimity that is unwavering no matter what's occurring in the world around. In other words, that mind rests in peace and equanimity because in essence it's only associated with the Dhamma. Or another way of saying that is it rests in right view. One of the reasons why the Buddha repeatedly taught wise associations, and it's really the underlying theme of this particular sutta, is that a mind rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths will compulsively try to incorporate every type of belief that it might find useful or that its associations insist are useful. And to use an example of modern Buddhism, most of the modern Buddhist practitioners, and almost to a person, the prominent teachers, no matter what tradition they're from, talk about religion, and especially Buddhist religions, are basically all one thing with the same goal and basically the same teachings. And so you can pick and choose what you like from this tradition or that teacher and this teacher, and discard what you don't like and what you don't find useful, keep what you find useful, and call that a Dhamma practice. I would call it a Dharma practice, to differentiate between a hodgepodge collection of different beliefs and making it Buddhism, where when you actually read the teachings of the Buddha was very simple and direct, incredibly consistent in what he presented as a Dhamma practice, and also very clear that whenever you would adapt, accommodate, or embellish his teachings in any way, the entire Dhamma was lost. It's not just a matter of degrees that you're doing. You're practicing some of the Buddha's teachings. The Buddha's teachings are very specific. They're highly effective in developing what almost every human being wants, which is a calm and peaceful mind, except we have to, maybe a better way of saying it, the most difficult aspect of the Buddha's Dhamma is recognizing the views that are rooted in ignorance and the very powerful and subtle strategies that any mind rooted in ignorance will employ to continue to ignore its own ignorance, including incorporating any other practice that might influenced by our associations or by charismatic or well-known teachers or other individuals. So let me get to the sutta. In the Sambodhi Sutta, the Buddha teaches the importance of admirable friends and other requirements in supporting self-awakening. The Buddha was at Anatta Pandika's monastery at Jita's Grove. He asked those gathered, "Friends, if those of other sects would ask you, what are the prerequisites for developing the wings of self-awakening, how would you respond?" The monks and nuns asked the Buddha to tell them his response so that they would remember it clearly. The Buddha responds, "Listen closely then. The prerequisites for developing the wings to self-awakening are here for you and available to everyone through the Dhamma. Having admirable friends and companions, remaining virtuous and restrained and understanding the danger of even the slightest fault." That relates directly to the Eightfold Path. The Buddha taught an Eightfold Path to provide the framework for Dhamma practice. And he provided that framework because he understood at a profound level that a mind rooted in ignorance will grasp at anything, including a so-called spiritual practice in quotes, to justify ignoring or embellishing, which is another aspect of ignoring, the direct and concise Dhamma. The Buddha continues, hearing easily sober talks and talks conducive to gaining understanding. Sober talk in this way doesn't mean just listening to someone who is sober, although thinking about some prominent teachers rooted in crazy wisdom who gave every teaching drunk, and his students still marvel at his ability to do that. It's not just that you should be able to avoid alcohol and mind changing drugs if you're going to be a teacher or talk about the Dhamma, but also that you aren't overly exaggerating what is the Dhamma in order to entice people to become part of this. This is another way of inducing the second noble truth, craving for and clinging to anything rooted in self-reference. So that's what the Buddha is referring to. Hearing easily sober talk and talks conducive to gaining understanding. Of course, if you're listening to talks that aren't framed by the Eightfold Path, and the only way you can do it, but you cannot teach the Eightfold Path unless you actually study the Eightfold Path and study what the Buddha teaches. In other words, if you don't study the Dhamma, you certainly can't be expected, nor should you expect yourself to be able to teach the Dhamma, except maybe in a conceptual way, which is what most of modern Buddhism is. Having talks on modesty, contentment, the value of seclusion and quiet, non-entanglement, persistence, virtue, concentration, discernment, and the knowledge of true vision and release from craving and clinging. The Dhamma are clear and direct talks on all of those things, ultimately leading to the knowledge and true vision of release from craving and clinging. And so why would anyone want to adapt, accommodate, or certainly embellish or diminish these teachings in any way when we know that they work? The only reason would be is a compulsive need to rooted in our associations with other people and the compulsion to actually ignore our own ignorance. And it works very well. I've been around modern Buddhism. I've been to some of the more famous temples and monasteries, studied with some of the more famous and well-known teachers, and even some of the local centers around here where I am in Frenchtown, New Jersey. There's a few in particular where the people that go there are very committed. In fact, some of these centers have been around for quite a while, but they never teach anything that is, or very rarely teach anything that is associated directly with the Buddhist teachings. And so I've been to these centers, as I said, quite a few times. They're very pleasant places to be, and there's very pleasant people to associate with, but they're not striving to develop the end of ignorance of Four Noble Truths. And so the engagement there is a pleasant social engagement, but without any real usefulness in developing the Buddha's Dhamma. So it's just another pleasant way of continuing to ignore ignorance. And with the group mentality that agrees that they are actually practicing so-called Buddhism, are simply reaffirming that belief. And I must qualify that. They certainly are practicing a form of modern Buddhism. They're simply not practicing something that the Buddha taught. The Buddha continues. Remaining persistent for abandoning unskillful mental qualities and for developing skillful mental qualities, resulting the resolute in right effort. Of course, we can't be resolute in right effort unless we actually are practicing and developing what right effort says, is to be mindful of each factor of the Eightfold Path as our Dhamma practice and nothing else. Furthermore, for one developing the wings to self-awakening, they would maintain discernment and understanding of impermanence and the cessation of stress by developing the Eightfold Path. The Buddha is talking about gaining the only insight that the Buddha teaches, which is insight into the three marks of existence, the impermanence of all things, the misunderstanding of self rooted in ignorance, anatta, and the resulting stress and suffering from misunderstanding the first two. The Buddha continues, when one has admirable friends and companions, it is expected that they will be virtuous and restrained, seeing danger in even the slightest faults, including the slightest fault of deviating from the Buddha's teachings. When one has admirable friends, defined by, in the Dhamma, actually practicing what the Buddha teaches and avoiding anything that he didn't teach, any adaptation, accommodation, or embellishment. When one has admirable friends and companions, it is expected then that they will hear sober talk and talks conducive to gaining understanding. They will hear talks on modesty, contentment, the value of seclusion and quiet, non-entanglement, persistence, virtue, concentration, discernment, and the knowledge of the true vision and release from craving and clinging. Again, a direct reference to the Eightfold Path. When one has admirable friends and companions, it is expected that they will maintain discernment and understanding of impermanence and the cessation of stress. Once these qualities are developed, there are four more to develop. Contemplation of what is unattractive so as to abandon craving. And of course, now the Buddha is getting very specific. Contemplation of what is unattractive in relation to awakening. So anything that continues conceit or I-making, anything that continues attachment, clinging, rooted in craving for that self-attachment, is to be recognized and abandoned. Goodwill should be developed so as to abandon ill will. Now, this, you can relate that line, and it's always, I don't want to use the word shocking because it's not shocking, but it's always disconcerting when I see people that call themselves modern engaged Buddhists taking an extreme hard view against any other people that doesn't follow in what their view of compassionate or some ecological view. And certainly we should all be compassionate. We should have compassion for our planet. We should have compassion for each other. But if that's rooted in ignorance, it's so easy to justify hate towards anybody that doesn't seemingly follow our belief systems. And that is rooted in ill will, and it's rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. I'll just say that again. Goodwill should be developed so as to abandon ill will towards anyone and anything. Mindfulness of the breath and the body should be developed so as to develop non-distraction. That's the Buddha's teachings on meditation as contained in the beginning section of the Satipatthana Sutta. The whole point of this, we just went through a series of talks on jhana. Jhana meaning deepening concentration. And that is the sole purpose for the Buddha teaching meditation, to deepen concentration. And an aspect of a mind that is rooted in calm and peace, a description that a Buddha gave to an awakened mind, is a mind that is well concentrated, a very gentle concentration. It's not a mind that is distracted by contemplating different themes such as self-care or compassion or even impermanence. Those are understandings that are developed from within the entire framework of the Eightfold Path. A meditation practice, as the Buddha just teaches here and throughout his teaching career, is to develop samadhi, non-distraction, or deep and ever-deepening levels of meditative absorption or concentration. They should develop understanding of impermanence so as to uproot conceit and uproot any further I-making. For when one understands impermanence, clinging to anatta, to not self, is abandoned. What a powerful sentence. When we understand impermanence, we'll stop clinging to ignorant views. It takes a very powerful and profound understanding of that, of impermanence. It's not just, okay, I can see that everything is impermanent and things arise and pass away. It's a very powerful and penetrating understanding of anicca, and ultimately it's the understanding of the impermanence of my own thoughts and my own beliefs and my own associations. And once we understand at a profound level the impermanence of these things, especially and most importantly the impermanence of our own fabrications, we will let them go. Let's go back to that one line. For when one understands impermanence, clinging to not self is abandoned. Understanding not self, from understanding this, uproots conceit. That's the path. The understanding what it is that constitutes not self. To understand that, we develop it through the Eightfold Path. Unbinding arises in this moment from the understanding of the three marks of existence at that profound level, rooted in wise associations, rooted in abandoning unwise or unskillful associations. And for many of that, for myself included, it takes great courage, great determination, and it takes great concentration to abandon unskillful associations. But it is a primary condition of the Dhamma, and it's a primary condition of overcoming a mind conditioned to ignore ignorance of Four Noble Truths. I see, looks like somebody joined. That's the you joined at the end of the talk, but I'll be publishing it. Well, it should be ready to be viewed in about a half an hour from now. I'll be publishing the talk a little bit later this evening or tomorrow. I appreciate you joining me. And so that's the end of tonight's talk. If you find benefit from these talks, please consider a donation at becoming-buddha.com. Thank you. Peace.